Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back. Today is International Indigenous Peoples Day for most people, and I'm celebrating the only way I know how to celebrate a holiday that I feel has racist undertones irreverently. In this case, by inventing my own Kekistanian holiday without the permission of the Kekistanian Church, forgive me, I would like to introduce you to and formally start celebrating myself Cultural Appropriation Day. A lot of you may immediately be asking yourselves, what is there to celebrate about cultural appropriation? Well, let's take a step back and look at exactly what cultural appropriation means, where the phrase comes from, and the hypocrisy buried in its roots. See, before cultural appropriation was even conceived as a phrase, at least to my knowledge, lots of people were talking about the idea of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is kind of the idea that diversity is our strength, that there are pros and cons to most people's societies and cultures, and that from learning from each other and taking the best, most brightest, and interesting of each other's cultures, we can build a better global society. Whether or not this means, globalism of everyone coming under one set of rules, or just every single individual national country becoming better in and of themselves is, irrelevant. Either way, it's good for everyone, it seems, to have a certain degree of, cultural sharing. That's where multiculturalism comes from, to my knowledge. And ultimately speaking, cultural appropriation is the same thing. See, when we start quote-unquote appropriating parts of people's cultures, that's because we like something about it. Because there is subjectively or objectively something good about it that we would like to continue on. And this brings me around to something that pissed me off, and I brought up with someone who I was a little bit wary of bringing up the subject around, and it turns out they had a similar story, which is Halloween costumes. Now, I've known for quite some time that people have argued against Halloween costumes being of certain types because of cultural appropriation. I guess I should take a step back and define, for anyone who doesn't know exactly what cultural appropriation is. This is when you wear something from another culture or do something from another culture. It's extended even into cooking certain ethnic foods or growing certain plants in certain areas. People will say that it's inappropriate because you are colonially taking possession of pieces of their culture. I don't know. Anyway, it's absolutely baffling to me that these same people who argue for multiculturalism argue that cultural appropriation is a thing, because don't you want us to appropriate the good pieces of each other's cultures? Anyway, this brings me around to Halloween costumes. Now, the story I just heard, minutes before starting this video, is of someone who is, to my knowledge, much farther to the left than me politically. Someone who, if she took the time to watch quite a few of my videos, would probably disagree with me vehemently. But as soon as I brought up cultural appropriation, brought up exactly the subject I'd already planned for this video, Halloween costumes. In this case, a friend of hers who is Samoan had wanted to dress up with a Samoan costume that was on shelves last year or the year before, but not this year. It's been taken away due to cultural appropriation. However, it is his culture. He's used to America being a melting pot where, there you can find things from multiple different cultures because we kind of take what's cool about a lot of them. When it comes to style, that means, since we like variety here in America, or at least I do, and I know a lot of other people who do, that we take all kinds of different things from indigenous cultures for something like Halloween, where variety is on wide expression. My example was on Twitter. I saw someone who had just checked with a Halloween store because last year they'd filed a petition to remove the Native American costumes and had been happy that it was successful. And I walked through the local Halloween section of my local Fred Meyer's, and I saw Chucky, I saw, It, I saw witches and ballerinas. Not everything was scary. All kinds of different costumes, but I couldn't for the life of me find one that didn't come from Western, or if we're racializing things, white culture. I think it being because all of them had been pulled from the shelves for cultural appropriation. Maybe there was one from an ethnic culture that I missed. I'm not an expert on these things, to say the least, but all the obvious runners-up were gone. This is because the same people who argue for diversity and inclusivity, exactly what having a variety of cultures, costumes is. It's inclusivity and diversity. Those same people will argue that that's really cultural appropriation. Because what they actually want is for people to be segregated, for people to be divided into neat little easier to control categories, because cultural communities that don't share with each other and grow are a lot easier to control than ones that do. And I'm still someone very solidly in the middle who feels that there are benefits to both the left and the right, the Democrats and Republicans, but if we look at this historically, it's generally speaking been the Democrats, even back into their KKK days, who've been trying to segregate people into neat, easy to define little boxes. It's the same people who argue against free speech, against your freedom to express yourself, who are arguing for inclusivity and diversity these days, at least inclusivity and diversity until they've decided it's inappropriate. And let's face it, everything has the potential of being offensive, so everything's going to end up being inappropriate. I mean, now, look at all of these costumes. They're all just, they're all just symbols of white people in different forms. Where are all of the inclusiveness? Where's the culture for the, minorities? It's all been erased. All been erased from the Halloween stores and from other sections of life. But that's, the big one I'm focusing on for October because, well, diversity and inclusivity is something that the people who scream loudest for them fight actively against. What they really want is segregation. And it's not what I want, but there's no winning, because now you look at all of these and it's all white costumes. So now they can start screaming for diversity and inclusivity again and start wheedling the costumes that they've so hated on back in, and once they're all in, well, then it becomes cultural appropriation again. They'll probably change the terminology for both along the way so that it sounds fresh and new when they sell it to you, but let's face it, this is just the same act we've seen before under new and less violent terms, and I think it's only less violent this time around with the segregation because the information age makes any atrocities that are committed a lot more visible. So hey, personally, I say we stick to the side of diversity and inclusivity. I say that we culturally appropriate as much as possible, that we take the good things from other cultures and use them to improve ourselves. That, honestly, if we want to be the best we can be as people, as nations, as ethnicities, as societies, why wouldn't we improve based on what we learn from others? And I mean, sure, Halloween costumes, having a Native American costume when there wasn't one before, maybe that's improvement, maybe it's not. I guess you could argue if you don't like Native American costumes that it's not improvement, but personally, I think diversity is amazing, especially on Halloween. But hey, that's just my opinion. And for anyone who doesn't fully understand the title, Kekistan is a cultural ethnic identity for people who think that it's a little bit ridiculous that governments are starting to let you choose your ethnicity. But anyway, thanks for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. As always, I'm your host, Cipher. I'll certainly do more on this subject in the future and do my planned video on the discussion I've been having about nationalism, but given that I found out this morning it was a holiday to some people, I thought I needed to find an appropriate way to celebrate. And to anyone else who identifies as Kekistanian, Happy Cultural Appropriation Day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club.